So do you ever notice as you get a little bit older, you have less and less time for things that aren't showing impact, and your spidey sense gets a little stronger for what those might be? I've been doing digital transformation in social change field for 20 years. I've worked on some of the biggest campaigns and social movements of our times, yet actually we have a terrible track record of actually winning power, of moving the needle on these social indicators for the greatest issues of our time: climate change, inequality, racial justice. I mean, we're underdogs, sure, but some movements have spent billions of dollars going nowhere. I know I've spent some of it. As a digital guy, I spent my career for a lot of clients building fake grassroots campaigns that tried to surround a target and make it seem like there was a social movement happening and scare them into making a decision. You know, we chalked up lots of incremental wins, but in the age of wrecking ball politics, we're not making big change. I think we should all be really humbled by this. And yet at the same time, there's these amazing campaigns that are kicking some serious ass. I'm talking about Fight for 15 for minimum wage. I'm talking about Keystone and the climate movement and Leave It in the Ground. I'm talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders. You know, what's their secret? Why can't more of our campaigns look like this? That's the question we set out to ask. So taking a step back for a sec, everyone in this room has built probably a pretty good career telling leaders what's not working about the world anymore. You know, we've seen technology disrupt all areas of culture and business and government. But in the NGO sector, while there's been bright lights of innovation rise and fall, fundamentally they haven't actually changed their model from a 1980s model of change. They're still fundamentally the same organizations that are bolting innovation on the side. So I don't have to tell you guys about how the world's broken, but there's essentially two main forces that have changed what we're seeing here. It's the cultural implications of a network society, which this community knows very well, and the increasing complexity of the world's wicked problems, these interconnected problems that are not just linear. So we know shit's broken, but what works? That's what we set to find out with the Network Change Report. And thanks to Jeffrey from Consumer Reports for helping fund some of this research. We wanted to find out who's winning across all sectors, across corporate campaigns, big, small, left, right. We looked globally, and for this research report, we looked at 47 case studies. We defined success in two ways. The first is impact, obviously, that there was a clear policy or governmental change, and then there was culture change along with it, so those changes actually stick. And then the second is something we call force amplification. So given the resources these campaigns had at the outset, did they punch above their weight? Did they leverage what they had to have much bigger change? As I said, we reviewed 50 case studies. About a third of them we'd worked on directly. A third of them we talked to the campaign directors, and another third we did a detailed literature review. One of the first things we found were there's three categories of organizations that are basically winning. The first are the ones we're all familiar with. We're talking about the US Chamber of Commerce, the NRA. These organizations basically pound the world into their shape. They get what they want. They have, let's take a look at the AARP for a second. In addition to 40 million members that they have real relationships with because they functionally organize and they offer them something of actual value in their lives, and their $1.5 billion budget, they're having some really interesting innovations that the rest of us can look at. They're really connected to their members. They understand their values, and they actually use their research they get from their member research department to run campaigns on their first order concerns. So when they run these campaigns, they show up. The people power is at the core of all these groups, or corporate, business power, if you will, in the Chamber of Commerce. When there's a real threat, for example, in Social Security, AARP mobilized 1 million people to make calls to Congress. That's why we still have Social Security. So these groups get what they want through scale and fear. The second category is what's caused the most interesting conversations in the last 10 years. These are groups like Occupy, the Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter at the start. Little or no formal infrastructure, resources, or institutional affiliation, and yet they quickly built up huge traction and national, if not international, prominence. They opened up vital discourse around issues that were previously ignored by the mainstream. Now, we all know that they rarely lead to policy wins, which is the well-worn critique, but they're actually laying the ground for a lot of future change to happen. You could certainly argue that the Bernie Sanders campaign is a direct line from the energy of the Occupy movement. So these things actually change the conditions that future things can happen in. The third section we looked at are the hottest ones, today's hottest campaigns: Fight for 15, minimum wage, the Keystone, climate, and tar sands, which is something I've been in a leadership role on for the last 4.5 years, the Bernie Sanders campaign. These campaigns are different. They're constructed to actually build grassroots momentum and distribute considerable agency to the fringes to the networks. And yet they maintain central oversight and framing, strategically directing this power towards concrete policy outcomes. They had resources, sure, but for the most part, they were enormously outgunned. On the tar sands campaign, we had a government and big oil spending $100 million trying to damage us and greenwash the tar sands. We had about 3% of their resources. So there's something, and we won in many ways. So because these campaigns are new and because they're winning, that's the focus of our study. Using a pattern matching approach, we looked at 4 principles that every successful campaign had, and even the bigger NGOs that weren't completely 2.0 or 3.0, whatever number we're at now, had some of these innovations inside of them. The first 2 are about horizontal structures that leave more power to supporters and networks. And the second 2 are about framing, management, and disciplined execution. So here are the 4 principles. The first one is about truly sharing power with supporters. It's about amplifying and involving them at every step. It's about letting them inform and speak and customize and actually co-create your campaigns with you. It's about showing the power to your target, so whether that's anchored through a petition or through real world or online swarming. Ultimately, this is about what Aaliyah was talking about yesterday and a lot of us talk about in this sector. It's about empathy, and it's about sharing power. The second one is really interesting. Acting alone essentially is not the way to make change anymore. Other than getting lucky once or twice, it doesn't work. Every single big win is operated like a movement, whether that's actually within multiple organizations in a movement, or in the case of, say, WWF, they organize their global network like a movement and spend as much time organizing country offices to engage in the campaign and succeed as they did doing their actual organizing work on the campaign. Hashtags are more powerful than brands these days. People don't want to share your brand, they want to share an idea, and having it be about a hashtag is what gives people the space to actually customize it and create it for them. The work of supporting a movement is not work. There's infrastructure that's required to convene and connect and serve these movements. This is very different work than delivering traditional campaign activities. And then the one that's the most exciting for me is about new networks, and we're actually showing through the research that it's actually those cross-movement collaborations that are creating the most power right now. And that involves a different kind of organizing. It involves going beyond transactional relationships to hopefully what we'll see as lifetime relationships of solidarity. And it's very different than our classic, come to my protest because my work is really important organizing that we're so used to in the past. Ultimately, this is all about letting go of control. But the age of the expert is certainly not over. There's important other side of these campaigns. One of the biggest things we found is they're framing an action-worthy problem and solution. They're finding a real problem that impacts an impacted community, and they're creating a solution big enough to be inspiring, but actually winnable. So these are the theory of change work that we're hopefully all getting comfortable with that language. They're grounding these campaigns in powerful narrative language and framing language. They're creating heroes, which aren't us, but the supporters, and they're creating supervillains. Almost every campaign we looked at had a supervillain. And they're doing sophisticated marketing, content marketing across all 4 channels of the modern content landscape. The last piece is a lot of what you guys bring to the sector. A lot of these innovations from tech and startups have not made it into the NGO community. Data-driven campaigns, doing fewer things well, focusing on some transformative innovations and ignoring a lot of the noise. Knowing what phase you're in a campaign, are you building power, are you finding your people, are you educating your base, or are there an actual winnable moment that you're in? Are you actually at a point where you spend your power, you spend your resources, you mobilize in a big way? You can't sprint when we're in a marathon, which is what a lot of these campaigns are. Being real with what you need to win and not giving up before we reach scale. And finally, ultimately being humble. Social change is really hard, and a lot of people in NGOs, expert culture, have a really hard time sharing things that aren't perfect, that have a hard time making mistakes in public, that have a hard time learning and having honest conversations and getting better at that. The research proves what we've actually already known for a while. It's actually people power that gives legitimacy to successful advocacy campaigns to win, period. It's what's driving the biggest wins right now, and it's not fake people power. These values, if they're not actually at the core of your organization of democracy, people are going to fail to find you and follow you. You're not going to break out of your silo and you're fail to make change. Because networks and movements aren't just something you can bolt on to your organization. They don't serve you, you serve them. This is a massive shift for how most people view the space. To get there means transforming our structures, our behaviors, and ourselves. It's a very different leadership style, something that's called maybe network leadership, maybe it's a feminist leadership is what I feel like it is. This work is ultimately about rehabbing our institutions. I actually believe we can't make the transformational change that this world so desperately needs in this sick culture to actually save our species and bring justice to all without institutions. They need to accelerate the innovations that are happening and fight those that are blocking evolution that's actually naturally occurring. Institutions aren't going to do it for us, but we can't do it without them. So this report is a map on how to make those that are making change and those who are funding it have more success, increase their batting average, have more impact in the world. It's available for free. Download it on our website. And my partner Tom Latchis is doing a panel at 3:15 called Directed Network Campaigns. If you want to hear some stories from some of these campaigns that are integrating these innovations. Ultimately, I hope it empowers you as a change agent and empowers your boss to win more big change, because God knows the world needs us to. Thank you.